There's a type of tiredness that sleep doesn't fix. You can sleep 8, 10, 12 hours and still wake up with that feeling of weight in your chest, like something is pulling you down all the time. This tiredness doesn't live in your muscles, doesn't live in your legs or your back. It lives in a deeper place, in a place we rarely have the courage to look at. The truth is, we live in a culture that glorifies exhaustion, that turns tiredness into a badge of honor, that makes you believe stopping is a sign of weakness. And in the middle of all that, we keep moving further and further away from our own center, from our own heart, from our own internal silence, until one day the body screams so loud that you can't ignore it anymore. When the world weighs too much, when you feel like you can't take one more day, one more conversation, one more task, one more demand, maybe it's not the world that's heavy, but you who have disconnected from your own center. The Tao, which is an ancient Chinese philosophy that teaches that everything in life follows a natural flow, and that harmony emerges when you accompany this flow instead of resisting it. The Tao talks about this in a way that is both simple and profound. It says that tiredness is not punishment, it's not weakness, but a calling, an invitation for you to come back home, inside yourself, to the only place where you can really rest. We spend so much time trying to keep up with the rhythm of everything and everyone that we completely forget to look inward, to ask ourselves what really matters, what really sustains us from within. And then we go on living on autopilot, doing everything we need to do but without really being present in anything, until exhaustion becomes so great that we can't fake it anymore. This tiredness you feel isn't just yours. It's the tiredness of an entire generation that learned to perform, to produce, to mold itself to external expectations, but completely forgot what it's like to live from the inside out. And maybe it's time to stop, not to give up, but to really stop, to return to your own rhythm, to your own breathing, to your own silence. Because rest is not luxury, it's not laziness, it's not weakness. Rest is the return home, to the center, to the place where you don't need to be anyone other than who you are. We spend our whole lives fighting against what is, resisting reality, trying to force things to be different from what they are, and this constant struggle is one of the biggest energy drains that exist. Have you noticed how exhausting it is to try to change something that can't be changed? How draining it is to keep ruminating on situations that already happened? How tiring it is to live in a permanent state of internal resistance? There are people who wake up already fighting with the day, already complaining about the weather, already resisting what needs to be done, and then spend the whole day in this posture of war against life, against circumstances, against themselves. And at the end of the day, they're exhausted. Not because they did a lot, but because they spent all available energy trying to make reality different from what it is. The Tao teaches something that seems simple but changes everything when you really understand it. It teaches that life has a natural flow, a movement of its own, and that the more you resist this flow, the more you suffer, the more you get tired, the more you get lost. Accepting doesn't mean agreeing with everything. It doesn't mean you're going to stop acting or trying to improve things. Accepting means recognizing what's in front of you without adding layers and layers of emotional resistance on top. It means seeing things as they are, not as you wish they were, and from that honest recognition, acting or not acting, but always from a place of clarity, not internal struggle. When you stop fighting the inevitable, when you stop spending energy trying to control the uncontrollable, something changes inside you. You realize you can save an absurd amount of emotional energy simply by letting things be what they are, simply allowing life to flow without needing to interfere in everything, without needing to have an opinion about everything, without needing to control every detail of every situation. And then rest starts to appear naturally, not as something you need to conquer or deserve, but as a natural consequence of stopping fighting with reality. The heart wears out trying to control the uncontrollable, trying to predict the future, trying to guarantee that nothing bad will happen, trying to hold all the ends at the same time. I perfectly understand this impulse, because I've also lived like this, trying to control every variable, every possibility, every scenario, as if it were possible to master life through obsessive planning and constant vigilance. But the inconvenient truth is that you don't control almost anything. You don't control what people are going to do. You don't control what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't control whether what you fear so much will happen or not. And trying to control the uncontrollable doesn't protect you from anything. It just leaves you exhausted. It just keeps you trapped in a state of permanent tension that consumes you from within. Life has an inevitable natural flow. It will follow its course regardless of how much you try to interfere. And maybe the most liberating thing you can do is recognize this, is to loosen the reins a little, is to trust that you don't need to be in control of everything all the time for things to work out. Trusting doesn't mean being naive. It doesn't mean you're going to stop making decisions or taking care of your life. Trusting means recognizing that there's a limit to what you can do, and that this limit isn't your failure, it's just the nature of existence itself. And when you stop trying to control everything, when you let go of rigid expectations and allow life to happen with a little more fluidity, the mental weight decreases drastically, and you realize you can breathe again. Rest appears when you abandon excessive control, when you realize you can do your best without needing to guarantee results, when you understand you can take care of things without needing to dominate every aspect of them. And maybe this sounds scary at first because we were taught that letting go of control is losing control. But the truth is, you never had total control of anything. You were just spending enormous energy trying to maintain the illusion that you did. Internal silence heals and organizes in a way that no productivity technique or time management can. I'm not talking about emotional isolation. I'm not talking about disconnecting from the world or running away from responsibilities. I'm talking about that deep quietness that exists inside you when you stop feeding the constant mental noise. There are people who spend their whole lives without ever experiencing a real moment of internal silence, because they're always with their head full of thoughts, of worries, of to-do lists, of imaginary conversations, of future scenarios, of memories from the past. And then they live in permanent overload, in an agitation that never stops, not even when they're trying to rest. The truth is that internal noise is more tiring than any external work. You can spend the whole day doing physical tasks and end up tired but satisfied. But if you spend the whole day with an agitated mind, with ruminating thoughts, with constant anxiety, you end up exhausted in a way that doesn't get resolved with physical rest. Silence as medicine means learning to create spaces of quietness inside you, means not feeding every thought that appears, not reacting to every stimulus that arrives, not transforming every situation into internal drama. It means allowing things to pass through you without letting them completely dominate you. When you seek moments of real pause, when you allow silence to exist without trying to fill every second with something, you realize there's a profound wisdom in this quietness, a capacity for internal reorganization that only happens when you stop interfering. Rest is born inside, not outside. It's not in paradise beaches or in long weekends. It's in your ability to create internal silence even in the middle of external chaos, in your ability to return to center even when everything around is agitated. The soul gets tired when it moves away from its nature, when it lives rhythms that aren't its own, when it tries to fit into molds that don't fit. Have you noticed how there are moments when you're doing everything right, meeting all expectations, reaching all goals, but inside you feel an enormous emptiness, a feeling that you're living someone else's life? This happens because there's a profound mismatch between the rhythm you're trying to maintain and the natural rhythm of your soul, between external demands and your deepest essence. We live in a society that imposes an artificial rhythm, accelerated, urgent, where everything needs to be fast, everything needs to be efficient, everything needs to generate immediate results. And the soul doesn't work like this. The soul has another time, slower, more organic, more respectful of life's natural cycles. The conflict between external demands and internal essence is one of the greatest sources of suffering in modern life. You feel like you need to be productive all the time, that you need to be always available, always responding, always delivering, always performing, and meanwhile your soul is asking you to go slower, to respect your limits, to honor your need for pause. But you ignore these signs because you learned that stopping is luxury, that resting is laziness, that respecting your own rhythm is a sign of weakness. And then you keep forcing, keep pushing, keep violating yourself internally until the body stops working properly, until you get sick, until you have no choice but to stop. Rest comes when you align life and internal nature, when you stop trying to live at the rhythm others expect from you and start respecting the rhythm that is truly yours. This doesn't mean you're going to stop working or having responsibilities. It means you're going to find a way to do what needs to be done without violating yourself in the process, without completely ignoring your soul's needs. And maybe this requires difficult changes. Maybe it requires saying no to some things. Maybe it requires disappointing some people. But the alternative is to continue living a life that isn't yours until you completely lose yourself along the way. Softness is stronger than force, and this is one of the most counterintuitive and at the same time most liberating ideas of the Tao. We were taught that strength is hardness, that strength is resistance, that strength is enduring everything without complaining, without showing vulnerability, without asking for help. And then we develop enormous emotional rigidity, create armor around the heart, become increasingly harder on ourselves and others. But rigidity is not strength. Rigidity is disguised fragility, its fear of breaking, its inability to adapt to life's inevitable changes. And all this rigidity creates a profound tiredness because you're always tense, always defended, always ready for the next battle. The gentle strength of the Tao is different. It's flexible like water. It adapts without losing essence. It yields when it needs to yield, but doesn't lose itself in the process. When you exchange hardness for flexibility, when you allow yourself to be gentle with yourself and with life situations, you preserve vital energy. You don't spend everything trying to be strong all the time. Softness is not weakness. Softness is emotional intelligence. It's the ability to respond to life in a way that doesn't exhaust you, that doesn't harden you, that doesn't transform you into someone you don't recognize anymore. Lightness is spiritual strategy. It's not escape from reality. It's not superficiality. It's the conscious choice not to carry more weight than necessary, not to transform every situation into drama, not to react with all intensity to every provocation. You can take life seriously without being heavy. You can take care of things without losing yourself in them. You can care deeply without letting it consume you. And when you understand this, when you start practicing this softness in daily life, you realize you have much more energy available, that you can deal with the same situations in a way that doesn't leave you devastated at the end of the day. Excess is a form of internal violence that we rarely recognize as such. Excess of tasks, excess of thoughts, excess of demands, excess of stimuli, excess of information, excess of superficial connections, excess of everything. We live above capacity all the time, trying to handle more things than is humanly possible. And then we're surprised when the body starts showing signs of internal rupture, when the mind doesn't process anything properly anymore, when emotions become dysregulated. Living in constant excess drains energy in a way that's unsustainable long-term. But we normalize this, turn it into a lifestyle, until we can't take it anymore. Reducing stimuli and demands is not giving up on life. It's caring for life. It's recognizing that you have limits, and that these limits deserve to be respected. The Tao talks about the middle way, about the balance between doing and not doing, between acting and resting, between getting involved and preserving yourself. And maybe the most revolutionary thing you can do now is start cutting excesses. Start saying no to what's not essential. Start creating empty spaces in your schedule, in your mind, in your life. Because rest doesn't happen in the intervals between one thing and another. Rest requires that you create real space, that you reduce the amount of things you're trying to carry at the same time. When you finally understand that you don't need to react to everything, that you don't need to have an opinion about everything, that you don't need to get emotionally involved with every situation that appears, something changes profoundly inside you. Reacting to everything exhausts you emotionally in a brutal way, because you're always activated, always on the defensive, always spending energy on things that don't deserve your energy. There are situations that simply aren't worth it. There are provocations that don't deserve a response. There are dramas you don't need to enter. And wisdom isn't in being strong enough to endure everything. It's in being wise enough to choose where you're going to put your energy. The practice of pausing before responding is one of the most transformative things you can develop. Instead of reacting automatically, instead of responding in the heat of emotion, you create a small space between the stimulus and the response. You allow the first wave of reaction to pass before deciding what to do. And in that space, you realize you have a choice. That you don't need to let yourself be carried away by impulse. That you can respond from a more conscious, more centered place. Not reacting is not weakness. It's not passivity. It's protection. It's emotional economy. It's the choice to preserve your peace instead of entering every war that appears in front of you. Rest emerges in emotional economy, in your ability not to spend energy on everything, to reserve your vital force for what really matters, to recognize that you're not obligated to participate in everything, to give your opinion on everything, to position yourself on everything. There are things you can simply let pass. There are situations you can observe without getting involved. There are dramas that will happen with or without your participation. And when you learn to make this distinction, when you start being more selective about where you put your attention and your energy, you realize you have much more internal resources available to deal with what really needs your presence. Letting go is not losing, it's allowing flow, and this is something that takes time to truly understand. We confuse detachment with abandonment, with indifference, with not caring, but detachment is something completely different. Detachment is the ability to care deeply about something without needing to control the outcome, without needing things to be exactly the way you imagined. It's the difference between loving someone and trying to possess someone, between caring for a project and completely identifying with its success or failure, between having preferences and transforming those preferences into rigid demands. Holding on too much generates suffering because you're trying to freeze life. You're trying to prevent things from changing, people from changing, yourself from changing. But life is movement. It's constant transformation. And the more you try to hold on, the more you suffer, because you're fighting against the fundamental nature of existence. Letting go of rigid expectations doesn't mean you're going to stop wanting things or working toward goals. It means you're going to do what needs to be done without tying your inner peace to the specific result you're seeking. It means you can give your best, and at the same time be at peace if things don't turn out exactly as you planned. Life flows better without excessive attachment, without the need to control every detail, without the obsession to guarantee everything will work out. And rest is born precisely when you let go, when you stop trying to hold everything so tightly, when you allow things to follow their natural course without needing to interfere all the time. This requires a profound trust, an acceptance that you don't need to be in control of everything for your life to have meaning and purpose. And maybe this is one of the most difficult lessons to learn, but also one of the most liberating. When you try to be someone you're not, when you live roles that aren't yours, when you spend the whole day performing to please others, you exhaust the soul in a way that no physical rest can recover. I know we learn from early on that we need to mold ourselves, that we need to be the way others expect, that we need to earn approval, that we need to maintain certain appearances. And then we create masks, develop personas, move further and further away from our own essence until one day we don't know who we really are underneath all these layers of social conditioning. Pleasing others drains energy because you're constantly monitoring yourself, adjusting yourself, repressing yourself, saying what you think they want to hear instead of what you really think, doing what they expect you to do instead of what you really want to do. And this creates an enormous internal tension, a feeling of always being displaced, of never being really comfortable because you're not being yourself. Identifying your masks isn't easy, because you've worn them for so long that you forgot they're not you. You forgot there's someone underneath all this performance. Authenticity is not an abstract concept or an unattainable ideal. Authenticity is the courage to be who you are, even when it disappoints some people, even when it doesn't fit expectations, even when it makes you less palatable to certain audiences. And maybe you'll discover that when you stop trying to be someone, when you stop forcing a persona that isn't yours, you can finally rest, because you don't need to maintain all that internal vigilance anymore. You don't need to spend energy sustaining an image that doesn't correspond to your internal reality. Rest emerges when you don't force yourself to be something you're not, when you allow yourself to be imperfect, vulnerable, human, when you accept that you don't need to earn everyone's approval to have value. And this is profoundly liberating, because you realize you can save an absurd amount of energy simply by being yourself, simply by stopping trying to impress, to prove, to be enough in others' eyes. You're already enough. You always were. The only thing that changed is that you started believing you needed to be someone else to deserve to exist. Rest as a return to the simple is something that sounds obvious, but that we completely forget in the middle of daily life. The mind creates unnecessary complexity, transforms simple situations into complicated problems, adds layers and layers of interpretation, of meaning, of drama on top of things that could be much more straightforward. Have you noticed how sometimes you take a situation that could be resolved simply and transform it into something huge, full of nuances, full of catastrophic possibilities, full of scenarios that probably will never happen? And then you get stuck in this mental complexity, spending energy on elaborations that only exist in your head. Reducing excesses and mental habits means realizing when you're unnecessarily complicating things, when you're creating problems where they don't exist, when you're transforming something neutral into a reason for worry. The simple heals and organizes because it takes you out of that place of constant mental elaboration and brings you back to what's really happening, not to the 1,000 possible interpretations of what's happening. The value of the essential is in realizing you don't need as much as you think you need, that life can work perfectly well with much less complication, with much less accumulation, with much less artificial urgency. Rest exists in simplicity, in your ability to return to the basics, to what really matters, to what really sustains you from within. And maybe this means simplifying your routine, simplifying your choices, simplifying your worries, simplifying the way you relate to life. It's not about having less necessarily. It's about stopping adding complexity where it doesn't need to exist. It's about recognizing that much of the weight you carry comes from the way you complicate things inside your own mind. Lightness as a spiritual path has nothing to do with superficiality or not taking things seriously. Lightness is the way you carry situations. It's the attitude with which you approach life. It's the choice not to add unnecessary weight on top of what's already naturally challenging. Weight is born from the way you interpret things, from the way you relate to them, not from the things themselves. Two people can go through the same situation, and one comes out devastated while the other comes out whole, not because one is stronger or more prepared, but because one learned to carry things in a lighter way. Adopting gentler attitudes doesn't mean you're going to stop caring or acting. It means you're going to do what needs to be done without transforming everything into internal drama, without adding layers of unnecessary suffering. Lightness preserves energy because you're not spending everything torturing yourself mentally, demanding excessively from yourself, punishing yourself for every mistake, worrying about every future possibility. Lightness is not escape. It's not denial. It's emotional intelligence. It's the ability to move through life without letting yourself be crushed by the weight of things. Rest is a consequence of walking lightly, of choosing not to carry more than necessary, of recognizing that you can care deeply without losing yourself in the process. And maybe this is one of the hardest things to learn, because we were conditioned to believe that if we're not suffering, we're not taking things seriously, that if we're not carrying weight, we're not being responsible. But the truth is, you can take care of everything that needs to be taken care of without destroying yourself in the process. You can honor your commitments without violating yourself internally. You can live with purpose without transforming your life into an unbearable burden. The fertile void is a concept that scares many people because we were taught that emptiness is bad, that emptiness needs to be filled immediately, that doing nothing is a waste of time. But the Tao speaks of a different kind of emptiness, a necessary internal space where things can reorganize, where new possibilities can emerge, where you can really rest instead of just exchanging one occupation for another. This emptiness is not absence of life, it's presence of space, it's internal availability for something new to happen. Doing nothing can be profoundly healing, but we don't know how to do this anymore, because even our rest time is full of activities, of entertainment, of constant stimuli. You finish work and immediately grab your phone, or turn on the TV, or look for something to do, because staying in the void, staying with yourself without any distraction seems too scary. But it's precisely in this void that real rest happens. It's precisely in this pause without specific purpose that your vital energy can truly renew itself. Accepting states of pause means recognizing that not every moment needs to be productive. Not every space needs to be filled. Not every silence needs to be broken. Emptiness reorganizes the spirit in a way that no self-care technique can, because it allows you to simply be, without needing to do anything, without needing to prove anything, without needing to achieve anything. And rest is born from this internal availability, from this openness to simply exist without an agenda, without a goal, without rushing to get anywhere. If you're enjoying this content, maybe you'll also like our exclusive material that's in the first pinned comment. Even the river rests before moving on, and this is not weakness of the river. It's not a sign that it's giving up on its path. It's a natural part of the flow. Nature is not in a hurry. It respects cycles. It understands that pause is part of movement, that rest is necessary for continuity to be possible. Trees lose leaves in autumn, not because they're dying, but because they're preparing for spring. They're conserving energy. They're respecting their own natural rhythm. And maybe we need to learn from this. We need to understand that stopping is not a deviation from the path. It's part of the path. Accepting your own periods of rest without guilt, without judgment, without the feeling that you're wasting time, is one of the hardest things for those who grew up in a culture that values productivity above all. But stopping strengthens continuity. Rest is not the opposite of movement. It's what makes movement sustainable long-term. You can't run without stopping indefinitely. You can't produce without stopping indefinitely. You can't be active without stopping indefinitely. At some point, the body stops. And if you don't choose when, it chooses for you. Usually in a much more drastic way. Nature validates rest in a way that modern society doesn't validate. In nature, everything rests. Everything goes through cycles of activity and repose, of expansion and withdrawal. And maybe you need to look at nature to remember that you're also part of it, that you also need to respect these cycles, that you also have the right to pauses without needing to justify, without needing to prove you earned it. Rest is not something you conquer through exhaustion. It's something you choose because you understand it's necessary, because you respect your own body, your own soul, your own limit. The soul exhausts itself trying to keep up with the world's rhythm, and this is especially true for people who are more sensitive, more introspective, more connected to the internal world. There are people who naturally need more time alone, more silence, more space to process things. And this is not a defect. It's not fragility. It's just the way some people are. But the world doesn't respect this. The world expects everyone to have the same rhythm, the same ability to deal with constant stimuli, the same energy to always be available, always connected, always present. The mismatch between sensitivity and accelerated world creates a profound wear. You try to keep up with everything, try to be present in all conversations, try to consume all information, try to answer all messages, and at the end of the day you're exhausted not because you did a lot, but because your nervous system wasn't made to process this amount of stimulus. Trying to keep up with everything causes wear that accumulates over time, until you realize you can't anymore, that you need to slow down the pace, that you need to respect your own nature instead of trying to mold yourself to external expectations. There's no problem with being slower, with needing more time, with not being able to keep up with everything. The problem is thinking you need to be like everyone else, that you need to have the same production capacity, the same tolerance for stimuli, the same life rhythm. Respecting your own rhythm is not an excuse to do nothing. It's wisdom to recognize your real limits and work within them instead of constantly trying to exceed them. Rest comes from the right rhythm, from your rhythm, not from the rhythm they're trying to impose on you. Accepting is resting, and this is perhaps one of the simplest and at the same time most profound truths of the Tao. Acceptance is not resignation, it's not giving up, it's not conformism. Acceptance is release of tension. It's the honest recognition of what's in front of you without adding unnecessary emotional resistance. When you accept a situation, you stop spending energy mentally fighting with it. You stop creating alternative scenarios in your head about how things should be. You simply see what is, and from there decide what to do. Resisting the inevitable increases suffering in a way that's almost impossible to perceive while you're in the middle of it. You think you're being strong, that you're fighting, that you're refusing to accept the unacceptable. But actually, you're just wearing yourself out. You're just adding layers of psychological suffering on top of something that's already difficult on its own. Recognizing limits is not weakness, it's clarity. It's the ability to see things as they are instead of how you wish they were. And when you recognize your limits, when you accept that some things are not in your control, you save an absurd amount of emotional energy. Rest begins where resistance ends. While you're fighting against reality, while you're spending energy trying to make things different from what they are, you can't truly rest because you're always tense, always ready for the next battle. But when you accept, when you let go of resistance, when you allow things to be what they are, something relaxes inside you, something truly rests. And this doesn't mean you're going to stop acting or trying to improve things. It means you're going to do what needs to be done from a place of acceptance, not internal struggle. Peace emerges when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop justifying every choice, every feeling, every decision to everyone around. Constantly justifying yourself is exhausting because you're always on the defensive, always trying to prove you have the right to feel what you feel, to do what you do, to be who you are. And then you go asking permission to exist, seeking external validation for things that only you can validate internally. Peace is born from inner self-sufficiency, from your ability to be at peace with your own choices even when others don't understand, even when others judge, even when others disagree. Stopping asking permission to feel is one of the most liberating things you can do. Your feelings don't need to make sense to anyone but you. Your choices don't need to be committee approved. Your life doesn't need to be understood by everyone. And when you understand this, when you stop explaining yourself all the time, you realize you have much more energy available, that you can use this energy to actually live instead of constantly justifying yourself. Silence is protection. It's the choice to keep for yourself what doesn't need to be shared, to not expose everything, to not transform your internal life into public debate. Rest requires stopping explaining yourself, requires that you give yourself permission to simply be, without needing to justify every aspect of your existence. And maybe this disappoints some people, maybe this makes some misunderstand you, but the alternative is to continue living for others' approval, continue spending energy trying to make everyone understand you. And this is unsustainable. This exhausts you in a way that doesn't recover. Resting is coming home, and home is not a physical place. Home is the inner center. It's that place inside you where you don't need to perform, where you don't need to be anyone other than who you are, where you can simply exist without an agenda, without a goal, without rush. You spent so much time away from home, so much time trying to fit in out there, so much time seeking external validation, that you completely forgot what it's like to be home, what it's like to rest in your own center. And maybe now is the time to return, not because you gave up on the world, but because you realized you can't continue in the world if you don't have an internal place to return to. Reconnecting with this internal space is not easy after so much time of disconnection, because you're going to have to go through all the layers of conditioning, all the internalized voices that say you're not doing enough, that you should be doing more, that resting is a luxury you can't afford. But these voices are not yours. They're echoes of a system that benefits from your exhaustion, that needs you to continue producing without stopping. And maybe it's time to question these voices, to recognize they don't have your best interest in mind. Rest is not giving up. It's not a sign that you're abandoning your dreams or your responsibilities. Rest is necessary maintenance. It's basic care. It's the recognition that you're human, and that humans need pause. True rest is reunion with yourself. It's the return to the only place where you can really recover, which is inside you. And maybe you need to hear this now. Maybe you need the permission you're waiting for, so I'm going to give it to you. You can rest. You need to rest. You deserve to rest. It's not weakness. It's not failure. It's not a sign you're not handling it. It's wisdom. It's self-care. It's respect for your own humanity. And when you finally allow yourself to truly rest, when you come home, to your center, you realize you can breathe again, that you can feel again, that you can live again. Because you weren't really living when you were exhausted, you were just surviving, just dragging yourself, just trying to endure one more day. But now you can do differently. Now you can choose to come home whenever you need to, whenever the world weighs too much, whenever you feel you're losing yourself along the way. Rest doesn't solve all problems. It doesn't make responsibilities disappear. It doesn't transform your life into a fairy tale. But it gives you back to yourself. It reconnects you with what really matters. It gives you energy to continue in a way that's sustainable, that respects your limits, that honors your humanity. And maybe that's what you need most now, not more strength to keep forcing yourself, but permission to stop, to rest, to come home and recover before moving forward. Because you don't need to do everything now. You don't need to handle everything alone. You don't need to be superhuman to deserve to exist. You're already enough. You always were, and it's time to finally believe that. So, subscribe to the channel, leave your like if this content made sense to you, and stay with me for the next video.